About this time of year, I always feel that I'm crawling towards the finish. Because Advent is finally here and not soon enough for me. The church begins its liturgical year with this season of preparation, the season of anticipation, this time of waiting. And it's reflected in the change of vestments, the shift in our music, the fact that we don't sing the Gloria. And so yes, Advent is here, and as I said, not soon enough. I say that because we make a very conscious effort during Advent to honor the season. We have an Advent giving tree. We have a crib, but it lies empty. We sing about the coming of Emmanuel, God with us. And we do this very intentionally here in church, and we try to avoid the C word. However, everywhere else it's been Christmas in September. At least, maybe October. But every mall, every retail store, every online site has been anticipating the holidays, Christmas especially, for quite some time. So you see what I mean by crawling to the finish line. It's almost anticipating something that's already come. But finally, Advent is here. But instead of going full thrust into the holiday season, we as a church are asked to wait for 4 weeks. 3 and a little bit this year. We are asked to be patient and to wait as our own salvation gets worked out in time. So what about Advent? Advent is a wreath of evergreen, the symbol of life, of growth, and of hope. It's the overture to the church's year. The theme, the focus, as always, is salvation. And this isn't some abstract concept, because the message is actually a startling message. God himself will come to save. So to put that into perspective, our liturgy brings us back 2,500 years, back to Isaiah and the exile in our first reading. We experience the expectation of Israel. Jerusalem and its temple are in ruins. The people have been deported to Babylon, and they must live among false gods. And that community is politically powerless. Its public worship virtually non-existent, sacrifice a thing of the past. And still in exile, they keep their faith alive. Their hope, their identity, their consciousness of continuity, more alive in exile than do their brothers and sisters back home in Jerusalem. Because they know that God will come, and God will return them to sacred soil. Half a century later, God does just that. The exiles go back to Jerusalem. But what do they return to? They return to a people who have changed, who practice nature worship and a fertility cult, who burn incense to idols and consult the dead, who eat the forbidden flesh of swine, and still, there is no temple. And yet, in all this despair, Isaiah preaches hope. Life is discouraging, yes. But remember that hope does not lie in fickle human beings. Hope lies in a God who is forever faithful. Our first reading lists Isaiah's woes, and yet he insists at the very end of it that God will be their everlasting light, that God will be the glory of Israel. And from Zion shall come forth salvation for the world. These are very bold words. Even bolder because they were meant for a people in utter despair. And so they wait. And that's what this season gives us. Advent gives us an opportunity to slow down and to wait, to prepare for the coming of Emmanuel, God with us. Now, waiting is not one of my favorite things to do. I'm impatient. I know. I don't like to wait, and apparently it's something I got from my father. My dad died 3 months ago today. He was diagnosed with a brain tumor in February and very quickly came to terms with his illness. He decided to forego radiation and chemotherapy because he wanted to stay at home, and he was very happy when we were able to care for him that way. By May, we were doing palliative care with 2 great nurses on 12-hour shifts. I was on sabbatical in Manila during this time, right before coming here, And I used to pray morning and evening prayer with my dad. Sometime in June, he was in a particularly reflective mood. And after morning prayer, he pulls me aside and he says, I'm ready. I'm ready to go home to God. So I said, okay, Dad, when you're ready and God calls, go and say hi for me. He laughed and he nodded. So I asked my mom and my sister to go in and say goodbye to him, basically to give him permission to go. I was running errands the next day, so I didn't get to see my father. But when I walked into his room the day after that to do morning prayer, my dad was in a very grumpy mood. I said, why are you in a bad mood? He said, well, I'm ready. He said, and it's been 2 days. So how much longer do I have to wait? I said, it doesn't work that way, Dad. You may be ready, but God may not be ready for you. Well, tell him to hurry up. Don't you have a direct line? Tell him I'm ready. Don't make me wait too long. 2.5 months later, my father died very peacefully in his sleep. Waiting takes things out of your control. It's frustrating. You feel helpless. You feel powerless. And so you want to move ahead, especially when you don't know exactly how long you'll be waiting, whether it's for a friend or for a return phone call or for the red light to turn green on the corner over here. I think it is precisely the feeling of hopelessness. In that feeling, that's exactly where God works. In waiting, in the unfulfilled time, when there is that empty space, God comes to fill it. It's an incredible hope, this hope of Advent, because it is the hope that God himself will come to save his people. And for 4 weeks, we relive that anxious expectation. Israel waiting. Mary waiting. John the Baptist waiting. We relive that expectation, but with a difference, because we know that hope has come. Our hope, born in Bethlehem, born of Mary. It is a hope that assures us that God is always faithful. God always keeps his promises. And so we are told, be watchful. Be alert. You do not know when the time will come. No, we don't. And yet we do. Because we have received the good news. Because Jesus has already come into our midst. Because the waiting that is Advent is the hope of God's salvation. And that is good news. Good news indeed.